Hogstye.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hogstye. This is Alex with you here. I am joined by Steve and Jamal, and we have a guest, Garrett Hudson. He's a former Richmond Spider and was with the Redskins in 2018 through their preseason. He has a background of one catch in the preseason versus the Ravens that year. But really excited to have you here, Garrett, because I love talking tight ends. It's probably one of my top three favorite positions in the NFL, next to fullbacks and punters, because I'm weird like that. But thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Great having you here. Let's start off with the big question that comes up. The Redskins obviously changing coaches. We got Ron here. We got Scott Turner here now. What do you see as the role of the tight end now in this new offense?
I think just based on what they did in the draft by not taking somebody and Thad Moss getting him for agency, and then kind of the guys that they've gotten throughout the offseason and the guys they have coming back, I think they're going to be using the tight ends a lot for pass protection, kind of using them to scheme up different types of creative runs, kind of stuff that you've seen the Panthers do in the past. But obviously be a little bit different because while I think Dwayne Haskins is more mobile than people give him credit for, it's not Cam Newton, so it'll look a little bit different. But I think, the guys they have are primarily blockers. They're bigger guys that have a lot of experience doing that. And I think that used correctly can really help open up our run game and then, get those guys opportunities in the middle of the field and play action opportunities.
So, as I kind of said, I'm a big fan of just tight ends, fullbacks, H-backs, all those kind of old-school blocker/receiver types. And it looks like, historically, that's been Ron's MOs. He's a lot more of a power guy. How do you kind of see that, all those positions shaking out with this new roster?
Yeah, I think right now it's kind of a toss-up with the guys that have. I think the way I've been looking at it is between Sprinkle, Henches, Logan Thomas, and Rodgers. I think they'll probably take the best two or three out of those guys. And, if Moss shows a lot, either as like a fullback, he's got like a fullback type body, so if they need a tight end to kind of do some of that power blocking out of the backfield and things like that, I think that they may keep him as a fourth guy or keep him on the practice squad. I think they're going to need, kind of a tight end by committee type group because a lot of the run game that the Panthers have used in the past that I see them bringing over to the Redskins involves multiple tight ends, involves fullbacks. So, they're going to need to have several guys that can fill several different roles.
I think a lot of fans, when they watch today's NFL, modern NFL, they're instantly thinking Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, and those guys are like Hall of Fame talent levels, I realize. But they're also playing a dramatically different role in the offense than our tight ends on some other teams. I've always called them joker tight ends. What is the difference between the role really like pass catching tight ends are playing versus what I would call a traditional inline tight end would play?
Yeah, I think those guys that you just mentioned, Jordan Reed was another one for the year he was healthy, are guys that don't do a lot of blocking, and the offense kind of revolves around them in the passing game. They're moved around to be put into different positions where they can get favorable matchups against, a strong safety or a Hugo linebacker, and that's great. And, they're kind of, in the run game, you're trying to hide their weaknesses, and in the pass game, you're trying to, amplify their strength. Whereas a traditional tight end is somebody that can, maybe doesn't give you as much in the passing game as far as route running or speed, but being in there for all three downs and being able to block and contribute in that sense opens up, things like play action, bootlegs, and that's where you see, your more traditional tight ends getting wide open because you have those linebackers and safeties sucking up, and it just creates space that the guys like a Travis Kelce or George Kittle can do through the route running.
And now you played with Jordan Reed, obviously, for the time you were with the Redskins. What made him such a matchup nightmare? Because you always hear analysts and play-by-play guys talk about what a nightmare he was. What made him so special?
I think one thing that he tried to teach me, which I struggled with because, when you're a young guy playing against NFL talent, it's hard to slow down, but he was very patient. He set everything up. He, I think he practiced a lot on his feet and the amount of steps each route had, how he planned it out a different route, and it was all just kind of second nature to him, so he could keep his eyes downfield. He could watch what the defender was doing, and he could set him up. He had this thing that he would do a lot where he would, if he wanted to break to his left, he would start breaking to his left, break back to his right, and then break to his left. So it was kind of like a 3 steps real fast, and it, if you don't know what you're looking at, it looks like he's just shimmying side to side, but he almost always got the defender to jump in the opposite direction, and just things like that. I think he was just a true pro, and he really took a lot of time and worked on his craft a lot, and it showed when you watch him run around.
And by the way, folks, this is our tight end position group breakdown week, so it's fortunate that we have Garrett here for this. Let's get into a little bit of some specifics about the players on the roster now. Now, Jeremy Sprinkle's a guy you played with Jeremy. He's kind of a decent combination of all of it. It seems to me he's got size, he's got strength. I think he's probably the best or maybe second best blocker of the players we saw. I mean, you've got Thaddeus Moss we haven't seen. But talk to us a little bit about Jeremy Sprinkle's game and where he can go to develop sort of from here to kind of get better, because he's the dean of the group right now.
Yeah, I think Sprink's got a lot of really special attributes that, not a lot of guys have. One of them being his height. He's really tall, and he's a good blocker, like you said. I think that he's gotten better with that every year because he's kind of filled that role for the past couple of years with Vernon and Jordan Reed being, more receiving tight ends. I think with him having a full off season of taking reps with the ones and kind of just building that confidence will help him a lot. I think that, when I watch him in practice, I was impressed with him. I thought he was really good, and I thought he could go somewhere else and start. Now, when I watch him in the game, I don't know if it's scheme or if it's nerves and he's not playing, the way he plays in practice, but hasn't translated yet. I think he's kind of a dark horse guy to watch to be that starter. And, he's lumbersome when he runs, but he's fast. I mean, I've seen him outrun some DBs and stuff in practice. So I think that if you're looking for a guy that can do it all, from what I've seen, I think he kind of at least somewhat checks all the boxes, and I think if he can continue to develop and get more comfortable and confident, I think that there's a good chance that he could break out this year.
And now what about we have Logan Thomas, now a converted quarterback. Have you had a chance to watch any of his now converted to tight end film? I know he's only got 30, 40 catches, so not a lot to watch, but
yeah, I've watched a little bit. I do like tight ends that have played other positions in the past. I think it's helpful because as a tight end, you have to know what everybody else is doing. You have to know the run game, you have to know the pass protection, you have to know all the routes. A lot of times your route depends, like if is working off of another route, you'll have a receiver clearing a space out for you. So you really have to know everything. I think his back end quarterback helps him out. And I think, he may be the best athlete out of the group. And, I only watched a little bit of one game, so I've heard that he's an effective blocker. I didn't necessarily see that show up like crazy on film, but maybe if I watched more film, I would see that. So he's another guy that I think, I think between him and Sprinkle, I think those are your two, like your tight end 1A and 1B. I think one of those guys is going to kind of emerge out of camp as the main guy. I think it's just going to depend on who has the best camp and who fits into this new offense the best.
I mean, Hale Hentages is the guy who sort of came out of nowhere last year, mainly out for injury reasons, I guess, more than anything else. He struck me as really sort of more of a blocking tight end, but he's got potential. He's another guy that has potential. So what'd you see of Hale Hentages from Alabama?
Yeah, I think, we were talking earlier about having a fullback type, H-back type tight end that can, I don't know if they're going to keep a fullback on the roster or not. And the easy way to use a fullback without wasting the roster spot on one is to have a guy like him or Moss. I think both of those guys are physical. I think that, what I saw from him just a little bit last year is that he will put his head in, he'll fill the hole, he'll put his head on a linebacker, and he'll, create a little bit of space in the run game. I think he's limited as a pass catcher. I think he's, just looking at 40 times, I think he had the slowest 40 time, not all the tight ends, which doesn't necessarily translate. But when you watch him on film, he's not the most explosive athlete. But he has good hands. So I think that, it's really how all these guys, they're not, all pro tight ends, but if used correctly in the scheme, they can all be very successful and very useful. I think he has potential to be pretty good as well.
Hey, one question that's just been getting at me for a good while now. Just overall, my opinion. And I want to ask you for this question. One of the things that's been getting at me is like this is collectively this is not the biggest or the most the strongest unit, I would say. The strongest unit of this offense, the tight end position group itself. But, from hearing from other people, a variety of people, you understand that some players have their strengths, some players have their weaknesses. Some people do blocking best. But I don't necessarily know if there's a great receiving tight end throughout this tight end position group. But my question to you is, what is collectively speaking, what is the strengths and weaknesses of the unit itself? They obviously drafted Thaddeus Moss. Well, I'm sorry, they signed Thaddeus Moss after the draft. And I guess he's I don't know much about him in depth outside of he's a blocker and he has good hands. That's all I know. And then you already talked about a few players on the roster, but the strengths and weaknesses of this position group collectively, what are those in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that the biggest one is their size. If you look at the roster, at the tight end position, I think, with the exception of Moss, I think they're all 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", 250, 260. I think, maybe even Rodgers maybe pushing 270. Yeah, they're all big guys. I think that can help a lot in blocking. And you're right, I don't think they have a true receiving threat at the tight end position. I was really pushing for them to sign or to draft a guy like Hunter Bryant out of Washington, which they didn't even need to draft him. I think he was available in free agency. And he's a guy who has struggled as a blocker in college. He's a smaller guy, but he's a dynamic pass catcher, and I think he could have kind of filled that Jordan Reed type role, just to kind of mix up the room, because I think right now, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but right now you have like 5 or 6 of the same guys, which if that's what, Scott Turner and Ron Rivera want for the team, that's like the prototype guys they want. And that's fine because, they know how to use them and that they're going to use them to their full potential. But right now they are kind of lacking that true threat at tight end, which I think, you sign a guy like, or you draft a guy like Antonio Gibson, you got Steven Sims, on the roster. So I think they'll have production in the inside of the field. So maybe it won't be that big of a deal not having a dynamic tight end. But I would have liked to have seen them get one in the draft.
Well, and that's the actually one of the things that you spoke on is the receiving aspect. It's kind of my biggest thing, because we saw last year what it was when Sprinkle was the starter for. I mean, it wasn't really his fault. He plays a specific role. And truth be told, I think the role that he's designed for in the offense, I think he plays that very well. He was just thrust into the number one spot. But anyway, the question that I had is, what specifically does this mean for Haskins? I don't necessarily think it's good for a quarterback, especially a young quarterback, to go into a season. Last year he had Jordan Reed and he had Vernon Davis. They get hurt. But now you're going into a season where you don't necessarily have that receiving threat. You don't have that comfort, that one person that you can really trust inside in the middle of the offense. And I don't necessarily know if there's going to be anybody from this group who can really help him when things get tough in the passing game and he needs to find an outlet or a safety blanket. I don't know if that's there, but how does this play an effect on Haskins, given that there's currently no receiving threat that we know of? It may things change down the road, but right now we don't see it.
Yeah, I think it definitely plays a part. I think, he, like you said, he's not going to have somebody that he knows is going to be able to get open at the tight end position. And, if everything, goes south, he can get the ball to him quick. I think where the tight ends that they have on the roster now will help him is in pass protection with shifts on defensive ends and maybe staying in and doing some 7 or 8 man protections and giving him more time to go through his reads down the field and make those throws. And then, I think if they do some similar stuff in Washington to what they were doing with the Panthers, I think that, they'll do a lot of bootlegs, some type of stuff they were doing with Kyle Allen last year when he was a young starter and they were trying to get the ball in his hand. So they'll move the pocket, they'll do bootlegs, they'll do play actions, and, the tight ends can still help him as receivers even though they aren't dynamic. The play will get them open. The overcompensation towards the run by the defense will get them open. So I think he will have a little bit of help, but not as much as he would have had he had a healthy Jordan Reed on the field.
Why is it that tight ends are always looked at as such a valuable safety valve for young quarterbacks? I mean, I understand they're kind of always going to be close to the line of scrimmage and stuff, but there always seems to be a special connection between young quarterbacks and the tight ends early on. I mean, as a former tight end, how do you why do you think that happens?
I think part of it is just the matchup that tight ends, have against the defense. I think, especially if you have a good slot receiver, you want to play man coverage. You got to put a safety or a nickel corner on him, and that leaves the tight end on probably your weakest cover guy, usually a linebacker. And I think I always said that tight ends are part of the best mismatch for the offense in football and the best mismatch for the defense in football. If you put a linebacker on a tight end in the NFL, if that tight end's going to continue playing in the NFL for a while, he's going to win that matchup. And then vice versa, if you put a tight end on a defensive end in the NFL, if that defensive end's going to stick around, he's going to win that matchup 90% of the time. So I think part of it is that matchup on linebackers, and then part of it's obvious stuff. He's in the middle of the field. He's in the quarterback division. A lot of times, passing contests will have the tight end as a built-in hot. So if the quarterback is getting pressured and they're bringing more guys than they can block, the tight end's usually the guy that's going to be open. He's going to be running into the flat or breaking his route off short. And the quarterback, if he knows what's going on, knows to get the ball to him quick.
You had 1,000 yards receiving at Richmond, so I think it's safe to say that you were a quality pass catching tight end, in college. What type of routes? When I think tight end, I always think of square ins, square outs, short slants, little button hooks, that kind of thing. But you see, these big time all pro guys, Jordan Reed, Rob Gronkowski, way downfield a lot. Is that just a function of their individual skill set, or are those teams using tight ends in a dramatically different way than what I would think of, again, as the normal kind of role?
It's probably a bit of skill set. a big route for a lot of tight ends in the NFL is the seam route, which usually has a bunch of different stuff off of it based on coverage. So, what you may be seeing is these square ins, these square outs, these button hooks are probably all just the seam read route based on the coverage. They're either, hooking it up in zone or breaking it across the middle of the field. And the reason that, you see Gronk, you see Kelsey, you see Zach Ertz, all these guys catching the ball down the field is because is they have the speed and the athleticism to get over the top of the safeties or outrun the linebackers to keep that seam, in the seam and going vertical. One of the rules is versus cover 4 in the seam, if the safety is within like probably 15, 12 yards, if you can beat him over the top, you take him over the top and you go for that home run shot. A guy like, Hale Hinch is he's not beating an NFL safety up the top. A Jeremy Sprinkle, runs a little bit better, but probably not beating an NFL safety over the top. So you see those guys breaking it in across the middle of the field and things like that. So it's probably scheme. You get more opportunities when you're a Pro Bowl tight end to run a bunch of different routes, but also, just guys not having the ability to make the most out of the routes that they're given.
Now, I have Thad Moss on the brain because I just wrote a big, long column on him this week. He's captured the excitement of the Redskins fan base because of his last name. But he's a very different guy than Randy Moss. He's 6'2". Jamal mentioned this earlier. He's more of a blocking guy, maybe a fullback. What have you watched from Thad Moss, and talk to him a little bit about his game?
Yeah, I think obviously, I think everybody watched a lot of LSU football this year with how good they were, and been going to the college football playoff and the whole thing. I think he's got the one thing he does have in common with his dad is his hands. His hands are incredible. His awareness is incredible. He's got a lot of the traits that, I guess not a lot of the traits. He has some of the traits that Randy Moss had if you put it in a shorter, bulkier package and take the speed away. I think that, he's a kind of a developmental guy at this point in time, which is good. You get him as a free agent. I think that he can come in and help right away as a guy blocking out of the backfield, as a fullback or your second tight end. He's gonna, if he gets open and you throw him the ball, he's gonna make the catch. He's a sure-handed receiver, which is always good. I think that with time, if he develops as a route runner, if he develops physically a little bit more, he could be kind of one of those, like you said, joker tight ends where they can also move him around a little bit and help him get those mismatches on the linebackers and the strong safeties because, he's not a blazer, but he might be the fastest tight end on the team, even not being the fastest guy out, and if you can learn to be patient, like you need to be to run routes and kind of develop that, he doesn't take speed to be an elite route runner. He can quickly develop a unique set of skills that could kind of make him a matchup nightmare and a guy that doesn't have to come off the field because he has that, that base as a really good blocker.
So let's fast forward to September. What's your tight end group for the Redskins? Of all these guys, who's your 1, 2, 3, or 4?
I think I'm going to be optimistic with Thad Moss and say that he makes the team that's, up in the air at this point. I think, you probably have Sprinkle and Logan Thomas doing the majority of the work. And then probably, maybe Moss or Hinchis as your third guy. And I think you probably can keep whoever out of those two isn't on the active roster on the practice squad. I think, I can't. Caleb Wilson and Marcus Ball, I think there might be the other guys in the very bottom of the depth chart. I think those guys are going to have a hard time making a team in any capacity, and I think that Richard Rodgers' best years are probably behind him. I think he'd be a pretty easy cut to make. So I think you probably have, out of Sprinkle, Thomas, Moss, Hinchis, 3 of those guys act as one of them on the practice squad, depending on who's, has practice squad eligibility.
All right. Let's move on a little bit to the draft. Do you have any kind of feel or take on the guys the Redskins picked? Not obviously, Young is the big name, but what about some of these other guys?
yeah, I mean, obviously Chase Young was huge. Getting him, I think everybody kind of knew that they were getting him from, week 17 on. I really, I didn't know a whole lot about Antonio Gibson when they picked him. I've done some research on him since then, and I think that's going to be a huge piece, especially with Scott Turner's offense and the type of guys that he likes to fall to. I think that, obviously Gibson's not, from what we've seen in college, is not the college player that Christian McCaffrey was, but I think he's going to fill a similar role. Or, even his floor is probably like a Curtis Samuel, another guy for the Panthers that's done pretty well there. I think he's a guy that Scott Turner likes to do some gadget plays and some misdirections and some reverses and lots of stuff like that. And I think Gibson gives you a guy that can get the ball in space and make guys miss and turn, a creative play into a huge game. So I really like him. And I also, I really like Antonio Gainey Golden as well. I think that there's going to be a really good competition between him and Kelvin Harmon for that boundary receiver spot. And I think it's going to make both of them better competing against each other. I don't know who's going to win out of that. I know a lot of fans really like Kelvin Harmon's potential, and a lot of guys are really excited about Gainey Golden. So I think whoever comes out of that position battle in camp is going to be a lot better for it, and I think it's going to help Terry get open more, help Steven Sims get open more. It's going to kind of balance out the receiving core.
Now, Gainey Golden is another guy from a smaller school in Virginia. Is this? I know he's probably after your time, but have you seen him play live? Do you know more about him than the average public person?
Probably not. I think I may have seen him play. I wouldn't have known at the time. He's probably, young and probably wasn't as productive as he was towards the end of his career. But just watching his highlights, I think he's got a unique ability to make some contested catches down the field, which if you're going to play, that single receiver into the boundary in the NFL, especially, I mean, he's a 4'5", 4'6", 40 guy. He's not the fastest guy. He's going to need to make those type of catches. And I think, if you watch the film over and over again, he's jumping over guys, making highlight catches and making one-handed catches. And I think that's something that translates to any level of football, right? If you're a fast guy in college, you may not be as fast as you thought you were in the NFL. If you're a big guy in college, you may not be as big. But if you're a guy that has sure hands and has a unique ability and a kind of a knack for going up and catching the ball and making tough catches, that always seems to translate through every level of football.
So, we're kind of finishing up here. Do you have any good stories from your time with the Redskins? Any good Jay Gruden stories or any weird stuff that happened in that tight end room when you were there?
The tight end room, the only weird thing was Jay Reed was coming back from his toe surgery, and he had this cream that he would put on his feet, and he sat right next to me in meetings because they put me in the back, and he would sit in the back because he already knew everything. And this cream that he put on his feet would smell so bad, and every day he would make the biggest deal about it because he knew I hated it. He would just slowly open up the container and just look at me the whole time, and I just put my nose in that shirt. It was pretty funny. It was kind of a running gag in the room.
What was this cream? What was it that smelled so bad?
I can't remember what it was called. It was it had a really long chemical
medical name.
One of those weird balms that people use that probably doesn't do anything.
He thought it worked though.
What about the coaches? Any fun memories from them?
Just Jay. I mean, Jay was such a great guy and a good players coach, and had a lot of fun. And I always thought being an undrafted rookie that I would just go through camp, and none of the coaches would really know me except my position coach. And he was always fun because he would come and mess with me, and he would he'd always come up and pinch my arm or something, or put me in a headlock, and it'd just be weird, just goofy stuff, which a lot of people think that he was too relaxed, and that was the reason that the team was unsuccessful or had a bunch of injuries or whatever. But as a player, he was fun to play for, and he used to always get me and one of the other guys, Matt Flanagan, confused. Like, I don't know if he did it on purpose, you know, kind of, the more I got to know him, I think he was doing it on purpose. But we'd be in practice, and I would be standing like 2 feet behind him, and Flanagan would do something, and he'd start yelling at Flanagan, but he would be calling Hudson. And I'd be like, Coach, I'm right here. Like, he can, like, that wasn't me. Can you please stop, like, touching me out in front of all the fans here in Richmond? But he was a funny guy, and he was a great guy to play for.
So one of the things that you talked about, because I actually didn't know, I know you played for the Redskins for a brief period, but I didn't know your draft status, and you mentioned you was undrafted. Just out of curiosity, because these things are always interesting, and if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't really I'm not familiar with your social media, but you said isn't your bio or something like a failed tight end something like that in the NFL or something?
It did just say former NFL tight end, and then I found myself getting arguments with people on Twitter. So I was like, you know, like everybody, I'd like to chime in and comment on stuff I see. And literally every single time I would say something, somebody would pop up. I guess they would see that I was verified and I had, you know, former tight end on there, and they would just say, "Who are you?" And I just got so annoying that I just like took the opportunity to just be like self-aware, and I just put 0 career catches in my bio just so people know.
Okay.
Like, I'm not coming from a place
where
I think I'm not coming from a place where I think I'm like some Pro Bowler or something. Like, I'm just you know, any other fan just wanting to talk football. Like, you don't need to, you know, try and check me and make sure I know that I wasn't, like, you know, in the NFL 15 years or whatever.
Random question, just because I
Hold one second, Alex.
Yeah, sorry.
The only reason why I was asking is more so because it wasn't necessarily about the social media aspect, but again, just like your career and the fact that you had, like, it was some type of self-awareness in your bio or something. So that's where I was getting at. I wanted to understand, like, what do you take away from your experience in the NFL, whether it was that short amount of period, or even if it would have been extended. But what do you take away from your experience in the NFL, and more so, why do you think things just didn't work out on your end in terms of being actually on a roster?
Yeah, I mean, I'm extremely proud of what I was able to accomplish. So growing up, I started football. I guess it wasn't too late, but like where I'm from, a lot of kids started playing tackle football in like 2nd and 3rd grade, and I didn't start until 6th grade. So I got a late start, and then, you know, every team I was on, I was never like the best player, I think, because of that, because, you know, these kids have been playing together for so long, they kind of had everything set. You know, this kid was the quarterback, this kid was the running back, you know, all these were the linebackers. Everybody had their positions, and it's been the same kids playing together for so long. And, you know, so I never thought I was a good football player, you know, up until after my freshman year of high school. They opened up a new high school, which was kind of like my big break, because I kind of got away from all the kids that had been on the same team since they were, you know, 7 years old. And, you know, we were really bad, so I didn't get recruited. But I went and I was a walk-on at Carolina. I transferred to Richmond, and I kind of had like an uphill battle my whole football career. So this, you know, just coming from the young kid that, like, you know, every kid wants to play in the NFL, and then going through my whole football journey, it kind of seemed like it was never going to happen. So just getting the chance to play in preseason games and, you know, meet Adrian Peterson, meet Vernon Davis, meet Alex Smith, you know, play with those guys, it was awesome. And I forgot the second part of the question.
That's all right.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say it's fine, but more, because that was good enough. But if there was a way, for the people who are listening, we don't know the age ranges, and there may be some people on that listens to our show that actually has kids, and they have some people who are looking into sports. But what do you think is some friendly advice for? I mean, you were a professional football player. What do you think is some friendly advice for these people out here who are trying to make it into the pros, given the route that you took, and the way you had to fight to even make it to an NFL team? What is some advice that you can give people who are listening?
I think, you know, one important thing is to take coaching, but don't let coaching like kill what you know about yourself, right? So like I played a bunch of different positions growing up, trying to see what I liked and stuff. And, you know, everybody was always telling me, oh, you should put on weight. You should be a lineman, or, you know, maybe you should be a quarterback. And, like, you know, you hear those things, and And, sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But you got to know what you want and what your goals are, and be realistic with yourself, right? If you're, if you're in high school and you're 270 pounds, you're going to be a lineman, put on weight and be a lineman. You're not going to play, quarterback. You're not going to play linebacker or whatever. But also don't let, somebody else's opinion of you kill your dreams, right? You gotta be able to take criticism, pick apart which parts of that criticism is constructive, which parts are negative, and be able to block out what you need to block out and focus on what you need to focus on, and just put the work in. I mean, I think a big part of why I was able to make it to the NFL was because I did extra. I always was doing extra. I didn't just, a college strength program is great. You're going to get stronger. You're going to get faster. But you got to do more if you want to separate yourself. So I think those are probably the two things. It's just like knowing what you're about and knowing what to listen to and what to ignore, and then, making sure that you're always doing extra.
Well, first of all, the Twitter folks who, criticize your NFL career are morons. I don't think people really understand that you're part of the 0.001% of athletes in this country who got to that level, and you certainly have every right to be proud, for
right.
sure.
I mean,
definitely.
A guy who plays no NFL games but at least gets in there is better than 99% of us.
Exactly, more than 99%.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Garrett, I think that was actually kind of a great note to end all this on. And I wanted to thank you for coming on the show and talking about tight ends with us. Love to have you back some point. But thanks for coming on.
Yeah, we appreciate
you guys having me. That was fun.
Yeah. Well, you have a great day then, Garrett.
All right, take care, boss.
You
Stay
too.
safe.
Bye.
See you guys.
All right. Well, that was Garrett Hudson we just had on the show. Guys, I thought he had some good insights on some of these players we're going to have at the tight end position, and it is kind of an interesting wild card group. You really have no idea kind of how it's going to be used or anything right now.
Well, I think you heard confirmation that what we all thought, which is this group does not have a big-time pass-catching tight end.
No.
Logan Thomas, the best athlete probably. He's got the biggest contract by far. He's going to get the first shot at it. Excuse me, but he's not Rob Gronkowski. None of these guys are. I mean, none of them are even Greg Olsen.
No.
Even
although
at that
Greg
level.
Olsen, much more of a traditional tight end in my mind.
Yeah, but he's also a Hall of Fame quality player.
Sure.
And that just doesn't exist here. So I mean, he talked. I think a lot of people got a pretty good view of Hale Hentage's last year just because he played, but notice where he ranked. And Garrett obviously knows the tight end position.
Sure.
Garrett was pretty clear that the number one and number two, Logan Thomas, Jeremy Sprinkle, then probably Thad Moss. I don't think we can expect Hale, based on what Garrett said, to be some kind of revelation this year.
Right. I mean, it is kind of interesting, too, that he sees the last guy basically having to turn into a fullback, in my mind. Because we thought that the Redskins probably would have to find a fullback with this new coaching staff because they used one in Carolina, but they haven't. So
it's funny you say that, though, Alex, because you know who's a perfect fullback?
Who's that?
Thaddeus Moss.
Well, yeah, and he had that point there too, Garrett.
Yeah, he did. And I've got the Thad Moss column up on the site. By the time you listen to this, there will be a Thad Moss film session on it, mainly because Jamal shamed me into doing, YouTube film sessions in addition to just my written breakdowns. So that'll be up there. But one thing that Moss does that other tight ends don't do, Moss is unafraid to dive right in the A gap.
Yeah.
Okay. LSU had him do that on occasion. Exactly like what a fullback would do. And in a 6'2", 250 pounds, he's actually the perfect size for a fullback. So I think if Moss makes a roster, he's going to be sort of a jack of all trades guy. He's going to be the inline tight end. He could play some H-back. They're going to use him at fullback on the goal line, and maybe keep Ryan Anderson on defense. So I think Thad could actually play a pretty big, varied role if he's, if he makes a team.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably a safe bet that him or Hentages, who I think has a great first name to be a Redskin, just being Hale. But, other than that, I don't really know if he really will make this roster.
Well, because the thing is, Thad has got really great hands.
He does.
He truly does. I mean, of all the film I watched on him, I didn't see one ball that he dropped. Not one drop.
If you are looking at what that old school traditional like 1980s tight end was going to be, he fits that mold perfectly.
He's a bit short. That's his thing. He is a bit short, but I mean, it didn't seem to make a lot of difference to me. Not to me. It didn't seem to make a lot of difference in college.
Yeah.
No, not really. Not to me. I didn't see it.
But I don't know, Jamal. What do you kind of think of this whole tight end situation we got going?
I think that the Redskins are in trouble. But I mean, because the only reason why I think that though is because when you're using multiple tight ends for right now, essentially it seems like the same purpose. Just they have different roles, they do different things better, but it all revolves around blocking. You don't necessarily know what they can provide to you in the other aspect of the game. Sure, pass protection and run blocking is fine, but what happens when you really need to throw the football? Who's going to be that go-to guy who can get you to 3 yards? Who's aware enough to stop at the sticks, or who can get the first down, as in go beyond the sticks and not at the sticks or right below the or right under the sticks, so they don't get the first down. Like who's this guy who's self-aware, who has the hands, who's able to break a defender down. If push comes to shove, they put you in man coverage, line you up in man coverage against a defender. I don't know if there's going to be that tight end out there, and if they don't have that tight end out there, that means then they're going to have to compensate by keeping that tight end in pass production, or having more wide receivers on the field. And essentially you're exposing your offense becoming a little bit more predictable, and that's just danger in itself. And you want to try and stray away from that. Somebody has to step up, and that can negate the possibility of being predictable. But if you're using the tight ends for the same purpose and there's nobody who can really step outside that realm, then you really don't have a good enough position group in itself. And that's what I really worry about, because Dwayne needs that more than anybody. And if he can't rely on the tight end group like he did last year, or like he couldn't last year, then I mean you're at the same place you was last year, dealing with Jeremy Sprinkle as a number one tight end, and everybody's saying that Sprinkle's bad, but that just wasn't his role. You're dealing with the same problems that you had last year. So we'll see. I'm not necessarily that impressed by this group. People are going to find a way as the season gets closer to try and find ways to reason why this group is actually better than people expect, or why they're sleeping on the group, especially when games are played and people see preseason and say, oh, this guy's going to be a star. That's when you get fooled. Because eventually when the regular season starts, you play all starters, you play all number ones on the defense, and you play a mix of number twos. So, and then you realize, oh snap, we don't have anybody. So right. Yeah, I'm concerned.
Right. So you don't want to see Moss versus Dishwasher and say, hey, he's going to be great, is what you're saying.
Versus a dishwasher?
A guy who's washing dishes. Yeah.
You're talking about the sixth string in preseason. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, it'll work well for him, and it'll give him some confidence, and hopefully that can propel him. But to your overall point, no, I don't want to see it, because it's going to fool some people. But it can work well if they can continue to capitalize on the opportunities. So when Moss gets that opportunity to go against the second and third teamers and he plays well, then you got something to look forward to.
Well, I mean, Jamal is right. Nobody should have a feeling that this group has a ton of talent, because they don't. And I think the Redskins are putting an awful lot on the lap of Logan Thomas. Mm-hmm. Maybe by default, because they just weren't, for whatever reason, they weren't able to draft somebody, like a Hunter Bryant, like Garrett was talking about, or sign some of these big free agents. They didn't, and so they're stuck with Logan Thomas. A reformed quarterback who hasn't played a lot of tight end and hasn't had a ton of success. That having been said, he's definitely the best athlete of this bunch overall. So maybe he can develop, but I mean, it's a gamble. They certainly don't have a Greg Olson,
No.
to this that was at Carolina. So it's I think the group is a problem. Unless somebody just jumps out and dramatically outplays expectations, it's going to be a problem. And Alex is right in that Dwayne Haskins needs a security blanket.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he has it.
And I mean, to that point, though, about, we're in a bad situation, we kind of knew this was going to happen going into the offseason.
Oh, yeah.
We all looked at who was available in free agency, and it was either going to be overpay for a slightly above average guy, or you're going to, have to take some chances. And I'm kind of happy we didn't spend $11-12 million on a guy who averaged, 500 yards a game or a season. Like
it wasn't a great tight end market.
It was a terrible tight end market.
Yeah.
The top two guys were, like I said, I'm saying average. They're not great. They're not terrible, but they
got overpaid because
they got
of the
way overpaid.
Year. Yeah.
Because that's the way free agency works.
Yeah, and just for the record, since we're doing our tight end position group breakdown, in case you didn't grasp this, here's the group. Marcus Baugh signed this offseason. Hale Hentage, as we've talked about. Thaddeus Moss, we talked about. Richard Rodgers also signed this offseason. Sprinkle, Logan Thomas, we talked about. And then Caleb Wilson, who was signed last year, who was on the practice squad and hanging around. Richard Rodgers is probably the guy. Richard Rodgers and Marcus Baugh are probably two guys nobody knows anything about. Rodgers has been around for a while. He was the third-round pick of the Packers in 2014. Has bounced around a little bit.
I vaguely remember him when he got drafted.
He's underwhelmed. I mean, there's a reason why he's now a Redskin.
Yeah.
And then Richard Rodgers was undrafted free. I'm sorry. Marcus Baugh, undrafted free agent last year out of Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's a guy, if you give him bonus points, it's that our guy Dwayne Haskins knows him. You know?
Sure.
So that may help him.
Yeah. But I don't know how much, because we all know Haskins didn't throw to tight ends in college anyway.
No, he didn't, but at least it's somebody he's got some kind of relationship with,
Sure. Well, unless anyone has anything else to add to the tight ends, we do have one big topic to get to this week, and our poll question ties us into that. And the
poll question.
Yeah, so why don't we do the poll question? Steve, you got it queued up?
I will in just a minute, so I will vamp.
Okay, let me vamp and finally
say
I am really kind of let down that the Skins didn't draft a couple of the interesting prospects from this draft at tight end. I did think there were some guys who could have surprised people, but Moss will at least give us something to look forward to.
If nothing else, we'll have Randy Moss hanging around, and that ought to be good.
Yeah.
Okay.
It might be amusing.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It'll be good for the players, and it'll be amusing to have Randy around, because Randy is a smart guy,
and also a lot of personality there.
Yeah,
I did not think about that. I surely hope we have training camp this year. I need to.
You need to find out when Randy's there.
I have to talk to Randy. I have some things I want
get
to
off
my
be
chest,
standing.
man.
Usually, guys like him, they end up standing where we end up, loitering as fake journalists.
Talk to him all you want. Just do it on the record. For the love of God, please get it on.
We'll
the
try
record. to. Okay, here's the poll question. Poll question this week is about the schedule. The question is, the Redskins schedule includes no primetime games and only one non-Sunday game, which is on Thanksgiving Day. How do you feel about this? Happy? I love Sunday games. Mad? It's disrespectful to the Redskins, or I don't care either way. Now, we thought about doing just your average predict the win-loss, but that's boring, and the truth of the matter is you have no idea.
Right.
If you think you do, you don't. We'll do that when we get closer to the season, maybe when we get into training camp like I always do. So, in the meantime, the question is, how do you feel about the schedule? So let's do what we always do, and tell us your thoughts and tell us what the fans thought. Let's start with Jamal this week. So, Jamal, what do you think?
I need the choices again.
Happy, sad.
Happy, mad, and I don't care.
Yeah.
Well, because I believe there's a lot of people who thinks like this on Twitter, I will say they don't care. Well, actually, I think they'll say they're happy. Because of the history with the team. So I changed my answer. Yeah, I think they'll say they're happy. Personally, it's kind of my answer. My personal opinion doesn't really reflect the choices, because I'm indifferent in a sense. But it's not like I don't care. It's more so like I don't even want to confuse the people who's listening. I don't even want to do that. But it's more so indifferent because like I wouldn't mind having at least one. But at the same time, I know personally the team plays better, and it saves me some embarrassment from having to watch primetime games and get embarrassed.
So I know for me personally, and these are all selfish reasons. I love the fact that we don't have any night games because I hate having to do Hogstye late night.
Oh, I know.
And you know, Steve, Jamal knows. Like, I'm usually disheveled and a wreck by the end of a Redskins loss on a primetime game. So, like, it's good for me and it's good for our listeners that they don't have to hear it. So, personally, I'm happy. And fans, I'm going to guess, are either indifferent or happy because we all know fans know the Redskins lose in primetime. So, fans are probably going to be, I'm going to say, happy or indifferent. One of those is the winner, and sad or disrespected is going to be like dead last.
Yeah. Okay. So by a vote of 65%, happy won.
All right.
So everybody's happy. 29. The second place vote was I don't care, which is 29%. And you guys are right. Only a small 7% of you out there were mad because it was disrespectful, and those are the disillusioned 7%.
Right.
Because most Redskins at this point have the Garrett Hudson philosophy and are self-deprecating about our Redskins fandom, and so we can't. There's nothing you can say, people. If you're a non-Redskin fan listening to this because you're like a Garrett Hudson fan, maybe. There's nothing you can possibly say that can possibly insult us at this point about this team. So nobody's going to be upset about something like this. In terms of comments, we got a bunch of really long comments, and so we appreciate that. But, of course, I can't read really long comments. But here's a good point. This is from Mike Parlett, Parlett316. Teams should be above 500 to earn primetime games. Now, that's not really how the NFL does it, but what you're saying is sort of what the NFL wants.
Right.
You know, like everybody has to get one Thursday game a year, but they're not going to pair like the Buffalo Bills with the Redskins. It's going to be the Bills versus like the Patriots to have some sort of draw.
Right.
And so that's actually, Mark is actually, he's wrong that the NFL does that, but he's right that that's kind of what they try to do.
Well, I think he's saying that should be a rule is what he's saying, not that the NFL does it.
Yeah. And the NFL probably wouldn't disagree with you.
Yeah, I think the NFL would love it if that were the case. I always thought that they did have a requirement that you had to have one Sunday or Monday night game for a while, but I guess with Thursday coming in, that's no longer the case.
Yeah, no, the rule is everybody has to do one Thursday because that messes with your schedule and everything.
What I'm thinking of, I think, was pre-Thursday night football.
It might have been, yeah.
There was that kind of requirement.
Yeah.
And this is now going to make, I think, 2 years that we didn't play on Monday nights in a row.
I mean, does it surprise anybody? We'll get into that.
You said Monday nights?
Monday.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't...
Yeah.
I don't think we played Monday Night Football last year either.
Yeah, they played the Bears. They got demolished.
Well,
Bears.
Did they? Okay. Maybe it was Sunday nights. I know they didn't play in one of those two.
Listen, I've slept since then.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple more comments here. You know what? I was gonna be petty and not say your name because it has a Nationals reference in it, which I can't. But he had a good comment. So this is Jeff at JPage520. Says keep the team hell away from primetime games. I think that encapsulates how almost every Redskin fan feels.
Exactly.
Another one, same thing. FLK27. We suck on primetime anyway. I mean, all of that is right. Now I did. If I can find it here real fast on the fly, I did a bit of research into the Redskins record on primetime games. Okay, I found it. Here we go.
Oh, we all know this is bad.
This isn't going to be good, people, so be ready. In the last 20 seasons, so 2000 to 2019, the Redskins have a 414 winning percentage, so 41% winning percentage. They're 132, 187 1. That's 28th in the NFL, okay? Primetime games on any day of the week. Primetime games, they are 19 and 41 for a winning percentage of 317, which is ranked 29th. So they're about a 10th worse in primetime games and are one lower in the rankings. Monday Night Football, this is where it really goes bad, goes south. They've played 28 times on Monday Night Football in the last 20 seasons, 5 and 23, a 179 winning percentage, 31st in the NFL, only better than the Buffalo Bills who've only played 8 times. Finally, Thursday night games. 13 Thursday night games in the last 20 years. 4-9, 308 winning percentage, ranked 29th. So it's fair and accurate to say they've been abysmal, even by their standards, on Monday Night Football. Atrocious. And they are a little bit worse overall in primetime games. That having been said, you could hypothesize that they're playing better teams, and on primetime games.
Right.
So they're bound to be a little worse. But that does not excuse 5-23 people.
Oh,
it does not excuse that. They've just been awful on Monday nights.
I also,
and that's the statistical proof of it.
Yes. I almost wonder if, and I know that they're not ever going to say this happens. I wonder if Dan Snyder's ever gone to the NFL and said, just please stop putting us on primetime. Because he knows these numbers. He knows.
I don't know, man. I don't think. Yeah. I mean, I hear you, but I don't know about that.
I wonder, though. That's all.
I mean, they just need to get better at that. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Okay, so let me. I can read through the schedule. I don't think it really. Here, my big thing on the schedule is it doesn't really matter, especially since we have one primetime game, Thanksgiving versus Dallas. I think that's going to be the focal point.
Stop you right there and say from a Hogs Tie show perspective how much I hate Thanksgiving Day games.
I've hated it not just from a hog. I don't like Thanksgiving football.
I just, Alex is right. The Hogs Tie late night shows are always miserable because we've done them at like 1 a.m. and it's just awful. But I mean, don't cry for me, Argentina. But the Thanksgiving Day games truly are miserable because it always interrupts Thanksgiving meals and all that stuff.
Right.
And
especially the 4:30 Dallas game.
Which is what we have again this year. And so, from a selfish Hogs Tie perspective, I wish we'd never play on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I'm with you there. At least the year we played New York, and it was the late night game.
That was a little better.
But it
was still, then it was a Hogs Tie late night event.
It was. And I'm always out of town, so I always miss the shows, which I don't like. But, I mean, I hate the fact that there's a 4:30 to 7 game, because who's not eating dinner? It's Thanksgiving. I'm usually stuffing my face with turkey and passing out by 7 o'clock. That's my plan on Thanksgiving.
When Alex says passing out, he literally means passing out.
Yeah, and that's not even drunk. That's just food. Food pass out.
It happens. I understand. I've had my share of passing out.
Yeah, I think that's every American's duty on Thanksgiving, frankly.
Let's run through the schedule here real fast. Because I know we're running out of time here. Let's do it by quarter. And we're not going to do predictions over game by game predictions. We'll do that in July. But the first quarter of the season, Philadelphia at home, at Arizona, at the Cleveland Browns, and then the Baltimore Ravens at home. That's how to start the season. And we're also going to assume that the season happens. With this coronavirus nonsense, it's a wild card.
Wait, did you went through some preseason there?
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
No. Philadelphia at home, at the Arizona Cardinals, at the Cleveland Browns, Baltimore Ravens at home. Now, they also play the Ravens in preseason at home on Thursday, September 3rd. Okay, so they're playing the Ravens in the 4th preseason game and then again in the 4th regular season game. So tell me what we're going to see in that preseason game. Nothing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely nothing. Thankfully, it's the last preseason game. They don't have much to do. Yeah, they'll just be throwing out the 4th stringers. Thaddeus Smalls will be starting that game.
Yeah. So thoughts on the first quarter of the season? I mean, mine, it seems like we always have the Eagles in week 1 for some reason.
Well, we did, because the reason I was confused, Steve, I pulled 2019's schedule by mistake, and we played the Eagles to start. So that's why I was confused.
That's because you weren't pulling the schedule posted on our own website, Alex.
No, I think I pulled it. I think I was somehow on the 2019 schedule.
You own a website, right?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. So my thoughts real fast on this first quarter. We always start with the Eagles. And it always demolishes our season right up front.
Yep.
They simply have to, even if they don't win this game, they have to look like an NFL team, for God's sakes. That's a very important game. Cardinals, Cleveland Browns, Baltimore Ravens. It's a long trip in week 2. I don't think Cleveland's going to be as good as everybody thinks they will be. I don't really believe in Baker Mayfield. So I think there's a couple wins in there. The Ravens are probably a loss.
Yeah, Ravens
they could win a couple games in here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at this and you're optimistic, you see this as hey, we could go 500 in the first 4 weeks kind of thing.
Realistic.
Yeah.
Jamal?
I think at best 2-2. At worst, you're looking. I mean, shoot.
Well, at worst, you can't get worse than 0-4.
You're at 0-4. I ain't gonna lie to you. I was trying to be optimistic and say 1-3, but look, at worst, you really can be 0-4. It's very possible with this team. When you the one thing that people will overlook and say that they have a shot against is Cleveland and Arizona, and that's true. They do have a shot. However, both teams are they're just as good, if not better, than the Redskins.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to take into account that both of those games are also on the road.
Yeah.
So, yes, you may have a shot, but things are different when you're home versus on the road, especially against two random teams.
Right.
Arizona the Redskins have a fan base in Arizona, but at the same time, they still are a little bit more talented, especially offensively. So
yeah, I mean, there's probably a guy in Arizona somewhere that has a Redskins jersey, but the Cardinals game is interesting because they're facing the wee lad, right up front, Kyler Murray, the 5'4" quarterback, and so you're going to see like immediately how good Chase Young is or isn't,
Right.
Because you got one of the most elusive quarterbacks in football, right up front.
I mean, frankly, the first 4 weeks, all those are good mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah, well, Lamar Jackson is a whole nother nightmare. We'll get to that. I don't even want to think about having to face him without linebackers the way they are. It's going to be a nightmare. Let's not torture ourselves.
Yeah.
The second quarter of the season, the Rams at the Giants, Cowboys at home, the bye week, which is week 8, and then the New York Giants at home. So it's It's an NFC East filled second.
Right.
Wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. Then we got to go to the Detroit Lions next. So it's
no. We're doing 4. You were right.
I was right. Okay, so Giants, Cowboys. No, I am right. No, I'm wrong. So it's Let me start over.
It's Rams, Giants, Cowboys, season. Giants.
There you go. Thank you. Rams, Giants, Cowboys, Giants. Very important quarter. You got 3 division games. You go 0-3 in that, and the season's over by November.
Yeah, all 1:00 games, which I like. The Sean McVay coming back to DC will be interesting, I guess, because I feel like a lot of fans are still in that's the one that got away mentality with him. But you know what? That bye week's perfect. Let's say that. At least it's not a week 3 bye week like last year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Dallas Cowboys, who's going to be playing quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys? They just signed Andy Dalton last week.
Right.
Which is interesting, and I think that's kind of Jerry Jones's FU to Dak Prescott's agent, maybe. That's an interesting move. The Giants, there's a team we should beat.
Mm-hmm.
The flat out, you should beat the Giants twice. They won't, probably, but they should. Did I cut you off, Jamal? You have any quarter 2 comments?
I was saying that's true. I will also add that I've been saying this for longer than a year now. I just don't think the Rams are good. And I think that they're reverting back to even quicker than how they rose. They're reverting back to where they were before they got there. This is probably I've been saying 7-9 for months. I'll stick to that. I won't drastically reduce the amount of wins, but I do think that it's kind of interesting that Alex brought up the one that got away, and I think that some fans do still think that, but I think the one a lot who did believe that at one point are suddenly fading, but they're doing it quietly. They're not acknowledging the fact that they were wrong. So even though Sean did make it to the Super Bowl and kind of got help from the refs, I do think that that feeling is kind of fading away, and the Rams aren't really that good anyway.
Listen, I think you're not the only one who thinks that. Jared Goff isn't, what he used to be, and maybe he's kind of fading back to the norm, on that offense, and it hasn't been as good. Dwayne Haskins face Aaron Donald doesn't excite me. But the Rams offense, yeah, I think you may be right. The third quarter, here's where it gets a bit dicey, folks. See if I can get through this without screwing it up. At Detroit Lions, Cincinnati Bengals at home, the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day in Dallas, and then at Pittsburgh. That's quarter 3. Three away games, 2 difficult teams.
Mm-hmm.
The primetime game, or the Thursday game, rather, that's tough. The Lions ought to suck. but the Redskins ought to suck too, according to the NFL. So that's going to be a toss-up. The Bengals, God only knows what Joe Burrow's going to be or not be by that point. Who knows? Dallas is always tough. The Steelers, when are the Redskins? When's the last time the Redskins beat the Steelers?
1963, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that.
It's been a while. Although I will say the Steelers no longer scare me like they did 3 or 4 years ago, but they're still a quality team.
Well, I think you have to legitimately ask who the heck is going to be their quarterback.
Yeah. Is it Fat, or is it one of these other guys?
Ben Roethlisberger seems to, at this point, have his annual injury.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that too.
Because he's just getting old and beat up and, all of that. So, there's no doubt that's a tough one. Okay, so fourth quarter. Doesn't get any better, from here, people. Fourth quarter at the 49ers. Seahawks at home, thankfully. Carolina Panthers at home, and then at the Eagles to close out the season. I would assume that you guys, like most fans, probably desperately want the Redskins to beat the 49ers.
Sure.
All right. Let me just put it this way. I'll be quick with the answer because I know you gotta finish your the schedule thing. But I do think this is more about Trent Williams versus the Redskins versus other as opposed to Kyle Shanahan and Trent Williams versus the Redskins, given the fact that they kind of broke that barrier once they traded Trent to the Redskins. Like, there's no Bruce Allen here. Dan Snyder's still here, but at the same time, Trent Williams is the nemesis this time. So it will be good for the Redskins to get a win because both sides are trying to prove that they're better off without the other. So that will mean having to get a win against that team. So for the Skins' sake, yeah, they need to win. Personally, what does it mean to us? Like, we play them once every 4 years for the most part. So.
To me, it's a combination of it. I get tired of Kyle Shanahan's mouth, and I think he's a little punk for the most part. And so I just want to see him. I'd want to see him beat him. I don't really have anything against Trent Williams. It kind of bothers me that he got what he wanted out of it. And it's not – I thought it was kind of funny that his contract extension demand just immediately died. You go to San Francisco and it was just over. So I don't, good luck to Trent, whatever. You're not on the team anymore. Freaking Kyle Shanahan, I want somebody to close his mouth.
Yeah, I'm actually with Steve there. I'm still more anti-Kyle than anything with the Trent Williams issue. Yeah. Because I think, Kyle Shanahan likes to pretend him and his dad had nothing to do with everything that went wrong, which pisses me off.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys were just as at fault.
Equally responsible.
Yeah.
By the way, I have the answer because it was bothering me about the Steelers question. The last time the Redskins beat the Steelers was November 17th, 1991.
91. All right.
Yeah. So it's been a while.
I was
lost
8.
6 in a row. They've lost 6 in a row. So, the odds are it probably won't go well. But the good news is that at least the Steelers fans won't take over FedEx Field.
Right. Right. The only question in my mind is, will it be week 16 or 17 when we've kind of thrown the towel in at this point?
Well, last year it was week 1, so we got to get past week 1.
That's true.
I think generally speaking, it's clear to me that the second half of the season is much tougher than the front half. They've got
after the Cincinnati Bengals, yes.
They've got a bunch. The last 4 out of the last 6 games are away. They're going to contenders. Mm-hmm. The Eagles are never fun, whatever team is good or bad. So they need to win some games up front. If the season's going to be successful, they need to start fast. I'll say that much because teams like the Cardinals and the Browns and teams like that and the Giants, they need to win those games. They have to win.
Yeah. I think, and again, we're not going to do the predictions, but looking at that last 6-7 games, the Panthers are the only one where you look at it and you're like, yeah, we could take that one because they're in a rebuilding year right now.
Yeah.
New coach who I obviously really like, but they're in a big rebuild at this point.
Yeah. And by the way, the noise you're hearing is Jamal's dog is participating in the show again. There's not much we can do about that. So welcome back again to the dog.
I'll try and cut down on some of that audio.
You know what's crazy? completely forgot to mute my mic again.
That's all right, Jamal. It's all right.
She forgot. I didn't even pay attention. She got the phone again. I'm sitting here listening to you all, and she's in the background biting her bone.
We're a dog-friendly show, Jamal. It's okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's good to hear.
We like the dogs. I lock my cats out, but it's fine. Whatever.
We're not a cat-friendly show.
No, because they don't make noise.
Well, the cats have ruined the mixing board once or twice.
That is true, because they like to climb on the mixing board. Yeah. All right, guys, I think that should wrap up this week's episode, unless there's any news that you can think of that we didn't get to, and I don't think there is. Nope. I think we signed like some fifth-string guard, but that didn't matter.
I should update the salary cap again, but they're at I need to update the roster to add that guard, but they're at about $37.4 million, not accounting the rookies. If you count the rookies, they're at about roughly $30 million in cap space. So that's
a lot of space.
I mean, they didn't, Amari Cooper was supposed to get a bunch of that.
Yeah,
and then they got rid of Trent, so that right there is $20 million.
Right. They have a lot of cap space to roll over next year. It sounds like. Yeah, all right, guys. Well, that should wrap us up for this week's episode. Thank you all very much for listening to the Hogsty.
Thanks to Garrett Hudson.
And thanks to Garrett Hudson, yes, for coming on the show. He had some very interesting points about the tight ends. And I think we need to get him back on and just ask him for stories about Jay Gruden being a goofy head coach.
I almost asked him if he tried to give him a purple nurple like Deshaun Jackson did.
Right.
I guess the answer is no when you're an undrafted free agent rookie.
No. Rookies who don't have the names memorized don't get to do the purple nurple. All right, guys. Thanks for listening in. Have a good night.